Hey gang, today we're doing a little drum solo analysis from the drum solo I recently played at DRUMEO. I was up there to film some other things. A drum solo was not on schedule, but I asked, hey, if we've got a little spare time, I'd love to film a couple drum solos. I'm trying to push myself. I was focused on some specific drum solo type of material, and I really cherish opportunities to essentially perform the drums, my instrument, in front of people, and sort of just have an opportunity to be on a stage here, a digital stage in this case. So they were great, and they said, yeah, we got time. So we did just randomly, we had a couple minutes, did 2 takes of a drum solo with absolutely no plan. But I did have some goals in mind, and this is a rare solo where I feel good about it, mainly because I felt like I stuck to my mission. So the mission was, and we're going to walk through the solo. It's the first half I think is really nice actually, and then the second half I think there's a lot to be desired, and it starts to lose its way. It starts to get a little boring. It starts to get unfocused, and it'd be interesting in this video to look at what that feels like and think about why and what some alternate ideas could have been that would have kept it engaging for longer. But the goal I had going into this solo, which has been on my mind a lot lately, is a couple of things. One, to not fall back onto my sort of personal cliche patterns, right? So my licks, the go-to things where I'm like, when I feel like the solo's not going well or I get a little anxious, then I just kind of like, okay, I'll just do that thing that's really, impressive and fast and whatever, and usually gets applause. So one, trying to avoid succumbing to that temptation. And the counterpart to that is to try to keep serving and doubling down on the mission I do have, which in this case is trying to do as much as possible with just rhythmic melodies. So trying to have the melody that I'm playing, the rhythms I'm playing, be engaging enough that I don't need to do flashy stuff. I don't need to drop in crazy fills, and again, sort of pull on those cliche chops that are a little bit of a cop-out, personally. Right, they might seem impressive, but I never feel good doing that because it is a way out of challenging myself in a solo and doing something new. So in this solo, what that means to really be trying to rely almost exclusively on melodic content is that the rhythmic melody I'm thinking of, da boom, ba boom boom, ba da da dum boom. Right, the core of my teaching philosophy about improvisation, and my philosophy about improvisation as a player as well, is that the rhythmic melody, your rhythmic vocabulary, is where the interest comes from. That's the root of the creative drumming, and then you can dress it up in a million ways that amplify or add to or multiply the uniqueness of the playing or the engaging, how engaging it is. But it's the melody itself that should be enough. So I'm trying to play a solo at DRUMEO where the rhythmic melodies I'm playing are enough, and I don't have to dress them up with impressive chops in order for it to be engaging. So that's my mission going into this, and I think, as we listen through, you'll sort of see what I'm talking about. You'll see where it's working, and you'll see where I'm falling short, and maybe where this idea, this mission, really is at some point ultimately doomed. I'm not sure I can play a 4-minute drum solo, and make the melody that engaging. I'm not sure if I'm there yet, but let's jump into it, and we'll just talk through what's going on a little bit. And it has already been interesting for me as I've been thinking about it, useful for me, and hopefully there'll be something to take away for you as well. Okay, let me pause for a sec. I think one of the successes of this solo was the pacing in the first half. So just to think about what that means, right? You're limiting yourself severely, and that gives you a lot of space to introduce things and for them to be meaningful. If I start by playing everything all at once, they all kind of, I've robbed the meaning of all those things, the surprise value that they might later add. So I'm on a kick drum and the snare drum and playing the toms, and that's really it. So orchestration-wise, we're limited, but this last little fill, this was the first moment of a faster subdivision. So we have 16th notes that come in here. If I rewind for half a second, the 16th notes become a bit of a moment, only because, right, not that 16th notes are very special, just because I wasn't playing them before. Three, four. Introduce the cymbals. This anchor starts happening here. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. So you can feel there's a strategy going on here in general where I have a home base and I'm venturing out a little bit at a time. And sometimes when I venture out, I'm adding a new sound, trying to make that make sense with what's going on. Or in this case, with that anchor, I call that an anchor, where you repeat something and then you go do other stuff, come back to the thing, do other stuff. It's an anchor that the listener can grab hold of and that you as the player can sort of orient yourself around. The anchor, right, we're almost a minute in here, we introduced that anchor, just another idea, right? So then I'm coming back to sort of home base immediately after, back to the cross stick stuff and returning there, right? And then we carry on, introduce the cymbals a little bit here. So I feel good about the pacing. I feel like thus far I remain engaged as a listener. Three, four, 1, 2. Triplets. Again with the pacing, we're just introducing triplets for the first time, but the orchestration is the same. Sounds really similar. Okay, it's all working for me still. Snares on. All right, we're coming to another section. We can kind of wrap up the first part of this solo, and we're approaching where it starts to get problematic. But so far, I feel like the pacing is working. We're introducing small ideas as we go, new sounds, new subdivisions, and then coming back, new subdivision, triplets, and then staying there. And so we're staying in triplets. But again, the orchestration is similar. So it feels there's a through line. This all feels very much like one section, right? And then changing the snare on, this to me sounds like section 2. If you, I wasn't necessarily thinking of it in the moment, but that's how it comes across. The other thing that you'll notice that is a decision, a very conscious decision, is I'm never keeping time with the left foot. Hi-hat is not involved at all yet. And again, that's a decision to give myself space, because when you add that hi-hat timekeeper, it elevates the energy significantly. It changes the feel. It connects you to the quarter note in a major way. And in this case, very intentionally, I'm saving what I'm doing. I'm saving that to give myself a place to build. Part of the challenge too with this, when I'm thinking about rhythmic melodies, the other thing that's been in my mind is I'm trying to play melodies that are interesting and engaging, but not confusing, right? So I'm not at any point here going to like loop fives in triplets or something, because that's not aesthetically pleasing, right? If I don't have a timekeeper, my left foot essentially being a metronome, I can't do that stuff and count on everyone to be with me when I get out on the other side. And that's not a good feeling as a listener. It's not a good feeling that I don't want to create that feeling. So I'm trying to be really aware of the melodies I'm playing being singable, being familiar, but sort of flirting with the edge of familiarity, which makes it hopefully interesting and engaging. So we're in a snare here. We brought in the snare, and we're going to build up to this tom thing, and it's going to start to lose steam. One, two, three, four, two. Still feels like it's building. Now it feels like there must be a payoff. Okay, now it's building even more. This feels like before the drop of the dubstep song. Building, building, building. There's no choice at this point. It has to kind of arrive somewhere. This is where it doesn't. Goes back down. I know what I was thinking there. It was kind of a fake out. And then it goes back into more, yeah, basically more of the same patterns I was doing on the tom, but just on the snare drum now, and we're here. There was no payoff. We desperately needed the payoff. We're 2 minutes and 18 seconds into this drum solo, and I just spent a straight minute essentially doing what is undeniably a build of tension. And the release that needed to happen was it needed to land on a groove, right? And it never did. It needed to land on a groove because somehow the time coming in and being concrete is the payoff. What that could have sounded like is, right, I'm doing, so here's the build. The build was working. We're going 3, 4. Better yet, get a little hi-hat ostinato going. That's the payoff that we needed there and we didn't get. And you can notice that you don't need more orchestration, right? So I added a hi-hat, but I'm still just playing tom and snare, right? The orchestration doesn't change. That is enough. Like you can make it interesting with just those tools. I just didn't. I made the wrong move. I went back down and then I got more into this stuff. And the lesson here really is that I was too committed to my mission in a way. I was so hell-bent on thinking about playing rhythmic melodies that were engaging that I missed the opportunity. I essentially had blinders on, tunnel vision, and didn't make the musical move that actually made sense because it wasn't one I was I was trying to avoid it in a way. But that, if we carry on, would have also made what comes next make more sense. We're doing this, and then there's a sudden tempo change. Triplets now, kind of hard to find time. Set it to get 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 it to. And a similar thing happens here. Runs out of steam. You can see right there. So I'm basically playing with triplets, and I've been working on this kind of orchestration for a while. So it was this kind of thing. That's already floaty, right? And then I essentially, it sort of feels like it needs to land somewhere. It's very sort of undefined. And the opposite of undefined is very defined. And that's where, again, a sort of groove thing would help, or an implied groove of some sort. So I'm doing that, and then I break it back down, which, again, is sort of just, it loses steam. I'm going... And what it could have used is like landing on something more structured, right? So because then I go into this really big part, and it would have just been a bridge that made more sense, right? Break it down into the ethereal thing. Something needs to happen. Big arrival point, right? What needed to happen was some structure that sort of sets that up, teased that up better than I did here. So it's a little bit aimless here at the end. I mean, we don't have to watch the whole rest of the thing here, but basically... yeah, that was a fine climax, right? Happy with that. It's an option, one of a million options. But really, those are like the important lessons here, the important takeaways, just to review. And I encourage you to watch the solo in its entirety again and see if you agree with what I'm saying, that the first half feels coherent the whole time. The pacing is nice. And then the second half... feels like it's wandering aimlessly through some ideas. And that's part of the challenge, especially when you get into that medium dynamic. It's sort of already intense. You're playing a lot of stuff that's kind of full already. There's not obvious ways to build, right? So in the beginning, it's easy because I can say, like, I'm introducing the cymbals, and that's a kind of a moment. I'm introducing a faster subdivision. I'm introducing triplets. I'm introducing space. I'm introducing an anchor. But once you're past the point of sort of like you've introduced several things, it needs to arrive somewhere and sort of coast. It doesn't need to do anything, but in this case, it would have benefited from arriving somewhere and staying there. And from there, it's this game of like, how do we build and take away the tension? How do we create tension and release here? And what I did not understand at the time when I was playing this, but which is what I'm seeing a lot more clearly now that I'm watching it back with you, is the release that is provided by a groove, by that backbeat coming in, by the hi-hat coming in, keeping time, a backbeat, or even just a backbeat every now and then, right? Like I was demonstrating with a couple options. That is a counter to purely sort of rhythmic vocabulary, melodic playing. And that's still my goal, and I think that that's extremely valuable. But I think I was too tunnel visioned on it, and I wasn't seeing some sort of obvious moves that are a bit more standard for me, right? I was trying to be a little bit too committed to my goal. But anyways, this was fun. Thanks for watching with me. Just some ideas, right? There's an infinite number of ways to play a great drum solo. They don't have to follow any rules specifically. Everything you just heard is my subjective take on what could have improved this solo for me, but I'm also happy with some of the things that happened in it. So I encourage you more than anything to just be analyzing. Be thinking about what's working, what's not when I watch this drum solo. At what point do I lose interest? Why? What's missing? What might have maintained my interest? Not just my solos, but any drumming that you're seeing out there, including recordings of yourself. So the tools that we use creatively generalize, right, across the board, whether it's a free jazz solo, punk rock solo, right? Some of the same ideas are going to apply across the board. And as you start tuning into them and just paying attention, you'll start to develop a sharper and sharper intuition for how to create engaging music with your instrument. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you're having a good day. Talk to you soon.